Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling a topic that feels like it just completely rewires the brain of anyone who has ever worked in sales, or honestly, anyone who's ever tried to convince someone else to do something difficult. We're looking at the Challenger sale.
Yeah, it really is a brain rewire. It's one of those rare business books where the data just completely contradicts your intuition. It takes what you think is being nice and essentially exposes it as being ineffective.
Exactly. So let me start with a stereotype here. When you picture the perfect salesperson, the one who just crushes their quota every quarter, who do you see? Like in movies or training manuals, it's almost always the relationship builder, right?
Oh, absolutely. The person who remembers your kids' birthdays.
Right. They agree with everything you say. They take you out for expensive dinners. They basically try to be your best friend.
Yeah, the person you want to grab a beer with after work. The ultimate people person who is always just available to fix your problems.
But according to the stack of research we're looking at today, that relationship builder, they are statistically the least likely to succeed in a complex sales environment.
Which is wild.
It is. In fact, the data suggests they're actively losing deals.
And that is a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The research, which came out of the Sales Executive Council, they looked at thousands of reps across multiple industries, and they found that while relationship builders are great at getting along, they really struggle to drive change.
Right.
So when the economy tanks or when the sale gets complicated, the nice guy actually finishes last. The profile that wins is the challenger.
And that is our mission today. We aren't just going to talk about why the Challenger wins. We are going to unpack the actual script they use. It's the 6-step choreography called commercial teaching. And honestly, I mean, even if you aren't in sales, this is a masterclass in persuasion.
It really is. It creates a complete shift in the dynamic between two people. It moves the conversation from what do you need to here's what you are missing.
I love that distinction. And just to set the stage a bit, this research started around 2009, right?
Yeah, right in the middle of the massive financial crisis.
Yeah.
So the authors noticed that while most reps were just drowning, there was a specific group that was still thriving.
They weren't just surviving, they were excelling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the question was, what are they doing differently? And it turns out they weren't just servicing demand. They were creating it through insight.
So let's get into the philosophy of this before we hit the 6 steps. This concept of commercial teaching. Because to me, teaching implies like a lecture. It implies I'm standing at a whiteboard boring you to death. But that's not what this is.
No, absolutely not. It is definitely not teaching the customer about your product features. That's just a brochure. Commercial teaching is about teaching the customer something new about their own business.
Right.
It's diagnosing a problem they didn't even know they had.
There's a specific reaction the authors talk about that really stuck with me. They say that most salespeople aim for the customer to say, "You're right." And that feels like a win. If I'm pitching you and you say you're right, I feel pretty good about myself.
It feels like a win, but it is actually a trap.
A trap.
Because if a customer says you're right, they are agreeing with you, but they aren't learning anything. You have just confirmed what they already know. And if you already know it, there's no urgency to change.
Makes sense.
The reaction a challenger aims for is entirely different. They want the customer to say, I never thought about it that way before.
That is the money word.
Exactly. That signals that you've just reframed their entire worldview. They are engaged, they're maybe a little unsettled, and suddenly they're listening very differently. You've broken their mental model.
Okay, so to get to that moment, the book lays out 4 rules for commercial teaching. I want to walk through these quickly because they really set up the script. Rule number 1, lead to your unique strengths.
This is critical. Whatever insight you teach, it has to lead back to the one thing you do better than anyone else. Otherwise, you're just giving them free consulting.
Right, because if you teach them about a general problem,
They might just say, thanks for the tip, and then go buy the solution from your cheaper competitor.
you don't want to be the unpaid tutor. You have to teach them a problem that only you can fix.
Precisely. And that leads to rule number 2, challenge assumptions. You have to tell them something they don't know or correct a misunderstanding they have about their own business. You can't just validate them.
Which is terrifying for the relationship builder, by the way. Telling a client they are wrong, that is extremely high risk.
It feels risky, but it actually builds respect.
Which brings us to rule 3. Catalyze action. You need to show them that the cost of doing nothing is actually higher than the cost of buying your solution.
We'll get into that cost of inaction later because it's a huge part of the script. And the 4th rule.
Scale across customers. You can't invent a brand new, complex insight for every single person you meet. You need to find patterns in industries so you can walk in with a hypothesis ready to go. There's a quote here from the source that sums up this whole philosophy perfectly. It says, "The best companies don't win through the quality of the products they sell, but through the quality of the insight they deliver." That is a massive shift. You aren't selling the widget, you're selling the perspective.
And that perspective creates loyalty. The data showed that 53% of B2B customer loyalty comes from the sales experience itself. Specifically, did the rep teach me something?
53%.
Yeah.
That's more than brand, price, and product combined. Okay, so we know why we need to teach. Now let's talk about how. This is the core script, the teaching pitch.
This is really the meat of the book. It's a 6-step template. And what's fascinating is that the authors call it a choreography.
A choreography, meaning you can't skip around.
Right. You can't skip steps or switch the order, or the whole thing just falls apart.
All right, let's role play this a bit to make it concrete. Step 1 is the warmer. Now, in a normal sales meeting, this is where I'd sit down, open my notebook, and say, "So, tell me about your business challenges. What keeps you up at night?"
And that is exactly what the challenger avoids.
Why, though? Literally everyone asks that.
Because if you ask what keeps you up at night, the customer will just tell you things they already know. They'll say, my costs are too high or my speed is too slow.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, if they already know the problem, they probably already have a solution in mind.
Yeah.
And it's usually a commodity solution. They're just looking for the best price from you.
So I am accidentally commoditizing myself by asking them what they want.
Exactly. The Challenger Warmer uses hypothesis-based selling instead. You start by saying something like, we've been working with a lot of companies similar to yours, and we've seen these 3 major trends affecting the industry. Is this resonating with you?
I see. So you present an assessment, you build credibility, not by asking them to teach you, but by showing them you know their world better than they do.
You're validating their pain before they even admit to it. It signals to them, I am an expert, and this is going to be a value-add conversation.
Okay, so you've warmed them up, you've established you aren't wasting their time. Step 2 is the reframe. This feels like the main pivot point.
This is the most critical step. This is where you drop that, moment. You take those challenges they acknowledged in the warmer, and you connect them to a much bigger problem they hadn't seen.
Let's look at a concrete example here because this insight to reframe to value template can feel a little abstract. The book talks about W. Grainger, the industrial supply company.
Right. Grainger sells hammers, light bulbs, safety vests, commodities. It is very hard to challenge someone on a hammer.
Yeah, you're using that hammer wrong. Probably isn't a great sales pitch.
Exactly. So usually customers just beat them up on price. They say, I can get this hammer for 10 cents less somewhere else. But Grainger's reframe was brilliant. They stopped talking about the item and started talking about the process.
What did that actually look like in the room?
They would say to a facility manager, look, you think your problem is the price of the hammer. But actually, your problem is that your purchasing process is so disorganized with people running out to buy things at the last minute that you are spending $100 in labor and processing just to buy a $10 item.
Oh, wow. So the problem isn't the $10 item, it's the $100 overhead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the reframe. You aren't losing pennies on price. You are bleeding millions on process. That creates the moment.
So they're leaning in, they're surprised, they're thinking, I didn't realize we were wasting that much. And now you hit them with step 3, which is called rational drowning. That sounds incredibly aggressive, drowning.
It sounds intense, but it is totally necessary. This is the business case. But notice, you still haven't mentioned your product yet. You're just pounding on the problem you just exposed. You use data, charts, and graphs to show the true cost of their current behavior.
The text mentions specifically that the ROI calculation here isn't about the return on buying your product. It's about the cost of inaction.
That's right. Most reps show an ROI calculator that says, if you buy my software, you'll save X. The Challenger shows a calculator that says, if you do not do anything, you will lose Y every single day. You want them to feel like they are bleeding money every second they sit in that chair?
You're making them deeply uncomfortable with the status quo. You are drowning them in the rationale of why they must change immediately.
But data alone doesn't always move people. We are emotional creatures, which leads perfectly to step 4, emotional impact.
Right, because rational drowning appeals to the head, but emotional impact appeals to the gut. But isn't B2B sales supposed to be purely logical? Why do we need a story here?
Because companies don't buy things. People do. And people are motivated by fear, by status, by security. You have to tell a story where the customer actually sees themselves in the problem.
So it's like, I see myself in this story, and I really don't like the ending.
Yes. You might say, imagine you're the director of operations, and this supply shortage happens on a Friday night and the entire production line shuts down. You make it personal. You want them to feel the stress. When they feel the pain of the problem personally, that is when true urgency kicks in.
Okay, so they are terrified now. They understand the math from the rational drowning, and they feel the pain from the emotional impact. They're totally ready to be saved. Step 5 is called a new way. This is where I finally pitch my product right. I hand them the Granger catalog.
No. And this is the trap almost everyone falls into. If you pitch your product now, you just look like a vendor who scared them to make a quick buck.
Wait, really? I still can't talk about my solution.
Not yet. Step 5 is about agreeing on a behavioral solution. You are convincing them of what they need to do differently, in general. You paint a picture of the perfect solution, regardless of who actually sells it.
So what would that sound like in the Granger example?
You'd say something like, to fix this $100 overhead problem, you would need a system that consolidates all your purchasing, gives you visibility across all your sites, and automatically reorders critical items.
So I'm just getting them to agree, yes, that is exactly what we need.
Exactly. You get them to agree to the fix before you ever tell them you sell the fix. Because if they agree that they need X, Y, and Z to survive, and then in step 6, which is your solution, you show them that you are the only one who offers X, Y, and Z, the sale is basically already made.
Ah, and that ties all the way back to Rule 1, leading to your unique strengths. You designed the new way in step 5 specifically so that only your product fits the hole you just dug.
That is the magic trick.
Hmm.
It looks like you're just giving them great objective advice, but you have actually engineered the entire conversation to lead inevitably to your specific differentiator. It feels like their idea, not your pitch.
It is brilliant, but it sounds really risky. It requires you to be pretty bold in the room. You have to walk a tightrope.
It does. And that brings us to the execution side of things. The source talks about the safe, bold framework for organizations.
I feel like most corporate marketing materials are squarely in the safe category. Things like, we are customer-centric, or we value quality.
Oh, absolutely. Companies are terrified of offending a customer, so they water down their pitch until it sounds exactly like everyone else in the market. But the safe, bold framework encourages organizations to actually grade their pitches. Is this pitch provocative? Is it innovative? Is it risky? If it is not making you a little nervous to say it out loud, it's probably not a true challenger pitch.
But this isn't just on the lone wolf salesperson to figure out, right? I can't imagine a rep sitting in their car inventing complex commercial teaching insights 5 minutes before a client meeting.
That is a recipe for failure. The book emphasizes organizational support heavily. Marketing and sales leadership have to collaborate to build these teaching decks. The insight, that deep understanding of the customer's business, usually has to come from the organization's collective intelligence, not just one rep's brain.
We mentioned Granger earlier, but there is another really great example in the book. ADP Dealer Services. They sell software to car dealers.
Right. And during the recession, car dealers were hemorrhaging cash. They were definitely not buying new software systems. So ADP couldn't just walk in and sell features.
So what did they do instead?
They used commercial teaching to show dealers hidden costs in their operations that actually had nothing to do with software initially, like how they managed their parts inventory. They showed them they were losing massive amounts of money on the shelf. And then they showed how the ADP software was the only tool that could automate the fix. They ended up thriving while the rest of the industry completely tanked.
That is so powerful, but I can hear some listeners thinking, okay, this is great, but if I walk in and start challenging my client and telling them they're wrong about their own business, aren't I just going to annoy them?
That is the common fear. But there's a major misconception about taking control, which is another key challenger skill we need to cover.
Right. Taking control doesn't mean being aggressive or rude. It doesn't mean being a jerk.
No, not at all. Taking control means bringing value. It means you aren't a passenger in the conversation, you are the driver. You guide the discussion back to value whenever it starts drifting to price.
Speaking of price, negotiation is where a lot of relationship builders just fold entirely. They want the customer to like them, so they give the discount immediately. Oh, you want 10% off? Sure, just sign here.
Exactly. They prioritize the relationship over the profitability of the deal. Challengers do not do that. They push back. The book details a framework used by DuPont to help their reps negotiate. It's a 4-step tool.
Walk us through that framework. What's step one?
Step one is acknowledge and defer. When a client asks for a discount early in the process, you don't say yes, and you don't say no. You say, I hear you, price is critical. But before we get there, I want to make sure we have actually solved the core problem.
So it's like we can definitely discuss pricing, but first let's make sure this solution actually stops the bleeding we talked about.
Right. You keep the tension alive in the room. Then step two is deepen and broaden. You dig back into the pain points, which is the deepen part, and you bring in other stakeholders, which is the broaden part, to increase the perceived value. You remind them of the rational drowning.
Remember that $100 you're losing on every hammer. Is a 5% discount on the hammer really going to fix that larger problem?
Exactly. Then step three is explore and compare. You compare what you are offering to the alternatives, and that includes the do-nothing alternative. You force them to admit that the cheaper option actually costs more in the long run because it doesn't solve the underlying process issue.
And finally, step four.
Concede according to plan. If you really have to give something up, you do it strategically, not out of panic. And you trade for things other than just price, like longer contract terms or better payment timing.
It is really all about keeping the tension constructive. Challengers don't get stuck in no decision land. They force a decision because they have made the status quo completely untenable.
And that leads to the final piece of the puzzle, which is tailoring. You can't just use the exact same script for the CEO as you do for the IT manager.
The book makes a really interesting point here about stakeholders. Because we often think the goal in sales is to get straight to the decision maker. Get me to the C-suite, get me to the boss.
But the data suggests that C-level executives actually do not want to talk to you until you have done your homework. And where do you do your homework? With the stakeholders, the people below the C-suite.
So you use commercial teaching to win over the stakeholders, who then become your internal champions to the boss.
Exactly. You teach the IT guy how this solves his ticket backlog. You teach the finance guy how this fixes his cash flow. By the time you finally get to the CEO, you already have a consensus built.
It is a really holistic system. It is not just be pushy. It is be insightful, be structured, and be deeply relevant.
That is it. It is about being a trusted advisor. But, and I think this is the key takeaway for me, a trusted advisor is not a servant. A trusted advisor is a teacher. A servant just does what you ask, but a teacher tells you what you actually need to know.
I think that is the perfect place to start wrapping this up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We went from the myth of the relationship builder, the nice guy who finishes last, to the reality of the challenger profile.
We broke down the entire commercial teaching pitch. The warmer, the reframe, rational drowning, emotional impact, a new way, and finally, your solution.
We talked about the importance of organizational support. You definitely don't want to go it alone. And we looked at how to take control of the negotiation without being aggressive using the DuPont method.
And ultimately, it just comes down to providing immense value in the conversation itself. Even if they don't buy from you, they should leave that meeting thinking, I learned something incredibly valuable today.
That is the standard. So here is the final thought I want to leave you with, straight from the text. It is a bit of a gut check for everyone listening who deals with clients or stakeholders.
If your strategy is largely one of being available to take care of whatever your customer needs, that can be a recipe for disaster.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Are you actually helping your customer by just taking their order and smiling? Or are you simply enabling their mediocrity?
Silence is expensive. If you see a cliff, you have to warn them, even if they don't want to hear it.
If you really care about their success, sometimes you just have to tell them they're wrong. That is the true challenge. Thanks for diving deep with us. Go teach someone something new today.
See you next time.